Part 1. The car that would not stop. The brake pedal sank beneath Claire Bennett's foot. Nothing happened. For one stunned second, she stared through the windshield as if the road itself had made a mistake. The traffic light at the bottom of the hill turned yellow. A grocery bag slid off the passenger seat. 2 oranges rolled beneath the dashboard, striking plastic with soft, useless thuds. Claire pressed the pedal again, harder. Her ankle trembled with the force of it, but the car kept gathering speed. "No," she whispered. A horn blared behind her. The sound tore through the sealed cabin, and Claire's hands locked around the steering wheel. Cars waited at the intersection below. A school bus had stopped in the right lane, its red lights beginning to flash. There was no time to think about Richard. No time to remember the anniversary dinner 2 nights earlier, or the woman whose name he had spoken as though Claire should already know it. Only the road. Only the children stepping away from the bus. Claire jerked the wheel toward the narrow strip of grass beside the shoulder. The car bounced over the curb. Her teeth struck together. Mud sprayed across the windshield as the vehicle tore through the drainage field, the steering wheel bucking against her palms. A low embankment rushed toward her. Claire turned her face away. Metal groaned. Glass cracked somewhere behind her. Then everything stopped. For several seconds, she could hear nothing but the turn signal clicking. Left, left, left. Claire opened her eyes. Her chest burned where the seatbelt had caught her, but she could breathe. Mud covered half the windshield. 1 orange rested against the brake pedal, bright and absurdly perfect. Someone was shouting outside. Claire tried to release the seatbelt. Her fingers would not obey. The driver's door opened with a sharp pull, letting in cold air and the smell of wet earth. "Ma'am, don't move yet." The man's voice was steady, older, familiar in a way she could not place. Claire turned her head. Gray threaded the dark hair at his temples. Deep lines bracketed his mouth, but she recognized the eyes. Owen Pierce, Richard's former business partner. The man her husband had accused of stealing from them 18 years ago. Owen recognized her a second later. "Claire?" She managed a small nod. His expression changed, but his hands remained careful as he checked whether the doorframe had shifted. "An ambulance is coming," Owen said. "Stay with me." Claire looked past him toward the road. A patrol car had stopped on the shoulder. Farther back, Owen's tow truck sat with its hazard lights flashing. "How did you—" "County dispatch. My garage was closest." Sirens rose in the distance. Claire swallowed against the dryness in her throat. The brakes wouldn't work. Owen did not tell her she was confused. He did not ask whether she had panicked. He simply looked at her for a long moment, then toward the muddy tire tracks behind the car. "Did anyone service it recently?" Richard handled that. The answer came automatically. It had always been the answer. Richard handled the cars. Richard handled the insurance. Richard handled the decisions Claire had once believed were too small to question. Her phone began ringing somewhere on the floor. Richard's name glowed beneath the passenger seat. Owen's gaze followed the sound, then returned to her face. "Claire," he said quietly, "when the police ask where you want this car taken, don't let anyone send it away before it's inspected." A chill moved over her skin that had nothing to do with the open door. "Why?" Owen looked toward the front wheel again. Before he could answer, tires scraped against the roadside. A black SUV stopped behind the patrol car. Richard climbed out before the vehicle had fully settled. He crossed the grass quickly, his coat open, his face arranged into the frightened concern of a devoted husband. "Claire." Her body reacted before her mind did. Relief rose first. Then Owen stepped slightly aside, and Richard saw him. For half a second, the fear vanished from her husband's face. Something colder took its place. Richard looked at Owen, then at the damaged car. Only after that did he look at Claire. "What is he doing here?" Richard asked. Owen straightened. "County rotation. I wasn't asking you." Claire flinched at the sharpness in Richard's voice. A paramedic approached with a cervical collar and asked everyone to step back. Owen moved immediately. Richard stayed close enough that his coat brushed Claire's door. "You're all right," Richard said, as though declaring it could make it true. "You probably panicked when the pedal felt soft." Claire stared at him. "I pressed it 3 times. You've been exhausted." The words came gently, almost kindly. That made them worse. The paramedic asked Claire whether she had lost consciousness. "No. She's had a difficult few months," Richard said. "My mother passed recently. Claire's been anxious. Claire turned toward him. She had cried after Evelyn died. She had slept badly. She had once left a kettle boiling while answering a call from the hospice nurse. None of that made her incapable of knowing when a car would not stop. The paramedic looked at Claire again. "Did you feel dizzy before the car left the road?" "No," Claire said. "The brake pedal failed." Richard exhaled through his nose. It was the same sound he made when she questioned an invoice or asked why he had returned home after midnight. The sound meant she was becoming inconvenient. The police officer approached Owen near the front of the vehicle. Their voices stayed low, but Claire caught fragments. Independent inspection. Evidence hold. Not ordinary wear. Richard heard them too. He left Claire's side. "My company uses Keller Automotive," he told the officer. "They know this vehicle. I'll have it taken there." The officer glanced at his notes. "The driver has already requested an independent inspection." Richard looked back at Claire. She had not made that request yet. Then, she saw Owen's business card resting beside her hand. Beneath his printed number, he had written 3 words in blue ink. "Do not release it." Claire's pulse beat against the tender place beneath her seatbelt. The officer came closer. "Mrs. Bennett, the vehicle can remain secured until an inspector looks at it. Is that what you want?" Richard answered before she could. "There's no need to turn a maintenance problem into an investigation." Claire looked at the man she had married at 27. His silver hair was damp from the mist. His wedding ring was still on his hand. 2 nights ago, he had placed that same hand over hers at dinner before telling their children that another woman understood him better. Everyone at the table had known except Claire. Now Richard stood beside the wrecked car, asking her not to look too closely. "I want the inspection," she said. Richard's jaw tightened. The officer nodded and returned to his patrol car. Richard waited until the paramedic turned away. "You're frightened," he said under his breath. "Don't make decisions while you're emotional." Claire looked at the mud on his polished shoes. She had heard the sentence in different forms for years. "Don't decide while you're tired. Don't question things you don't understand. Don't embarrass the family. Let Richard handle it." The ambulance doors closed behind her. Through the rear window, Claire watched Richard walk directly to Owen. She could not hear what they said. She saw Owen shake his head. Richard glanced toward the car again. Not toward the ambulance, toward the car. At the hospital, the doctor found bruising across Claire's ribs and shoulder, but no broken bones. She would be sore for several weeks. Richard sat beside the bed, scrolling through his phone. Megan and Evan arrived 20 minutes later. Megan rushed forward and wrapped Claire in a careful embrace. Evan stood at the foot of the bed, pale beneath his office tan. "What happened?" Megan asked. Claire opened her mouth. Richard answered, "Your mother lost control on the hill." Claire looked at him. The brakes didn't respond. Richard set his phone face down. "We don't know that yet. I was driving, and you were upset." Megan's arms fell away. "Mom, were you thinking about the dinner?" Claire felt the room change. It was subtle. A tightening. A shift in the air. Richard had already given them an explanation. The accident belonged to Claire's emotions now. Not to the car. Not to the inspection. Not to anything he might have done. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe we should wait until the mechanic checks it." "An independent inspector," Claire said. Richard looked at her sharply. Evan frowned. "Why independent?" Before Claire could answer, Richard leaned back in his chair. Owen Pierce was the tow operator. Both children knew the name. Richard had made sure of that. Megan's face hardened. "The man who stole from the company?" "He says that didn't happen," Claire said. Richard gave a quiet laugh without humor. "Of course he does." Claire studied her husband's face. He had been calm when the doctor discussed her injuries, calm when Megan cried, calm while telling their children that Claire had lost control. But Owen's name had changed him. For the first time since the crash, Claire stopped trying to prove what she remembered. She began watching what Richard feared. Later, after the children had gone to find coffee, Richard stood beside the window with his back to her. "You should tell the police you don't want an investigation," he said. Claire touched the bruise forming beneath her collarbone. "Why?" "Because this will become gossip. Insurance questions. Employees wondering whether the company is stable. I nearly hit a school bus." Richard turned. "And you didn't?" His voice was soft again. Measured. The voice he used when he wanted the world to believe he was the reasonable one. "Let the garage fix the car," he said. "Come home, rest. We can handle the separation privately." Claire looked at the man who had spent 32 years teaching her that privacy meant loyalty. Now privacy meant silence. Her phone vibrated on the hospital tray. A message from Owen. The car is secured. I gave my initial observations to the officer. I cannot prove who caused anything, but this does not look like ordinary neglect. Do not let anyone pressure you into changing your statement. Claire read it twice. Richard took one step toward her. Who is that? She turned the screen face down. No one you need to handle. The words surprised both of them. Richard's eyes narrowed. Then he smiled. Not warmly, patiently, as if Claire were a problem that would eventually tire itself out. He picked up his coat and left the room to call the insurance company. Claire waited until the door closed. Then she opened her email and searched for the insurance documents Richard had arranged 6 weeks earlier. The confirmation appeared near the top. Coverage approved. $900,000. Her own electronic signature sat beneath the application. Richard Bennett remained listed as primary beneficiary. Claire stared at the amount until the numbers blurred. The larger policy, the farmhouse documents, her refusal to sign, the crash 2 days later. Her phone rang. Owen's name appeared on the screen. Claire answered without speaking. His voice came low and careful. The inspector has seen enough to recommend that police preserve the vehicle, he said. But Claire, you need to understand something. Her fingers tightened around the phone. What? There's a difference between knowing a failure wasn't normal and proving who caused it. Claire looked toward the doorway Richard had just passed through. For the moment, suspicion was all she had. But Richard had made one mistake. He had taught her how to keep records. Claire had not understood how carefully Richard had prepared the anniversary dinner until she saw the same sentence move from his mouth into their daughter's. Mom, were you thinking about the dinner? Megan stood beside the hospital bed, one hand still resting near Claire's shoulder. Concern softened her face, but the question carried Richard's conclusion inside it. Claire had not suffered a mechanical failure. She had become emotional, lost control, and frightened everyone. Richard sat near the window with his phone turned face down on his knee. Claire looked at him, then back at her daughter. The car did not stop when I pressed the brake pedal, Claire said. That is what I was thinking about. Megan's lips parted, but Richard answered first. No one is accusing you of doing anything deliberately, he said. The words struck Claire with their false generosity. No one had suggested she acted deliberately until Richard denied it. Evan shifted at the foot of the bed. Dad only means you've been under a lot of pressure. Claire studied her son's face. Evan had Richard's brow and her habit of rubbing one thumb across the side of his index finger when he felt trapped. He was doing it now. What pressure? Claire asked. Silence stretched across the room. Megan lowered her gaze. Richard leaned back as though he had been forced into a difficult conversation by Claire's refusal to let kindness stand. Your mother is tired, he told the children. She has been tired for a long time. Claire's ribs tightened beneath the hospital gown. 2 nights earlier, those same words had opened the door to everything. The restaurant had been warm enough that Claire removed her cardigan before the appetizers arrived. Small candles flickered in glass cups along the walls, turning every wineglass into amber. A pianist near the bar played songs soft enough to recognize but quiet enough not to interrupt conversation. Claire had chosen the place because Richard once loved it. On their 10th anniversary, when money had been tight and Evan still needed a booster seat, Richard had saved for 3 months to bring her there. He had worn a tie too wide for his collar and spent half the meal checking the prices before ordering anything. That night, he had taken her hand over the white tablecloth and said, "One day, we'll come back and order without looking at the right side of the menu." 32 years into their marriage, Claire had thought they were finally keeping that promise. Richard had arrived late. He kissed the air beside her cheek and apologized to Megan and Evan before he apologized to Claire. His coat carried the faint smell of unfamiliar perfume beneath the winter air. Claire noticed it. Then she told herself it belonged to someone from the crowded entrance. She had been explaining him to herself for so long that the explanations came before suspicion. Megan ordered sparkling water. Evan asked about a development proposal Richard had mentioned at work. Richard answered with careful enthusiasm, describing renovated cottages, weekend rentals, and a growing market for families who wanted country charm without country inconvenience. Claire listened for several minutes before realizing they were discussing her aunt's farmhouse. "You've seen the proposal?" Claire asked Evan. Evan stopped turning the stem of his glass. "Dad showed me a rough version." Richard unfolded his napkin and placed it across his lap. "It was only a conversation." "A conversation about my property?" "Our family's future," Richard corrected. Claire felt the old impulse to soften the moment before anyone became uncomfortable. She smiled at the waiter when he approached. She asked for another basket of bread. She waited until the young man had moved away before speaking again. "The farmhouse came to me through Aunt Ruth's estate," Claire said. "I haven't agreed to use it for anything." Richard's expression remained pleasant. "No one said you had." Megan looked between them. "Can we not do this tonight?" Claire turned toward her daughter. "Do what?" Megan's shoulders rose, then settled. Richard reached for his wine. It was a tiny movement, but Claire saw the relief in it. Megan had spoken before he needed to. The first course arrived. Plates touched the table with quiet ceramic taps. Claire tried to ask about Megan's students and Evan's plans for spring. Each answer lasted only a few sentences before Richard guided the conversation back toward the company or the farmhouse. By dessert, Claire had stopped eating. A thin wedge of chocolate cake sat untouched in front of her. Richard had ordered it without asking, even though she had preferred lemon for years. The waiter placed a small candle in the center. "Happy anniversary," he said. Claire thanked him. Richard waited until the waiter left. Then he folded both hands on the table. "I'm moving out." The pianist continued playing near the bar. Someone laughed at a table behind Claire. A spoon struck the rim of a coffee cup. Ordinary sounds remained ordinary, even as the room shifted beneath her. Claire looked at Richard's face. His eyes were clear. His voice had not trembled. She glanced at Megan. Their daughter's gaze dropped to the candle. Evan stared at the tablecloth. The cold traveled through Claire's body slowly. "You knew," she said. Megan's eyes filled. "Mom, how long?" Richard leaned forward. "This is not about putting the children in the middle. You put them here." Claire's voice came out softer than she intended. The softness seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. Evan looked up. "Dad told us a few weeks ago." "A few weeks," Claire repeated. Megan reached across the table, but Claire moved her hand into her lap before their fingers touched. "What did he tell you?" "That you both knew things hadn't been right," Megan said. Claire turned toward Richard. He held her gaze. "I told them the truth as I understood it," he said. Claire almost laughed. The sentence was so polished that she could imagine him practicing it alone in the car. "What truth was that?" Richard glanced around the restaurant, reminding her without words that other people could hear. Claire lowered her voice further. "What did you tell our children about our marriage?" He exhaled. "That we have been living separate lives for some time. We sleep in the same bed. That is geography, Claire, not intimacy." Heat climbed beneath her collar. Megan pressed her napkin between both hands. "Dad said you'd been unhappy too." Claire looked at her daughter. "Did I tell you that?" "No, but you've been exhausted. Since Grandma got sick, you haven't been yourself." There it was again, not yourself. Richard had taken 6 years of caregiving and turned them into evidence that Claire could no longer interpret her own life. She remembered the medication alarms at 2 a.m, the waterproof pads hidden beneath Evelyn's sheets, the way Richard's mother had once gripped Claire's wrist and whispered that she was ashamed to need help using the bathroom. Richard had traveled for work during much of it. When he returned, he kissed his mother's forehead, praised Claire for being wonderful, and went upstairs to sleep. Now her exhaustion belonged to his defense. Evan cleared his throat. "Mom, nobody is blaming you." Claire looked at him. "Your father just announced that he is leaving me at our anniversary dinner, and both of you knew before I did. What would blame look like if this is not it?" Evan's face tightened. Richard's voice became gentle. "This is exactly what I was afraid of." Claire turned toward him. "What were you afraid of? That you would hear an attack when no one is attacking you." For a moment, she could not breathe properly. The trick was simple. Richard wounded her, then used the pain as proof that she was unreasonable. Megan's eyes moved toward the surrounding tables. "Can we please keep our voices down?" Claire had not raised hers. Richard had counted on that too. He knew their daughter feared scenes. He knew Evan feared instability at the company. He knew Claire feared becoming the woman everyone discussed after she left the room. He had given each of them a different reason to protect his comfort. Claire looked at the candle melting into the cake. "Is there someone else?" she asked. Richard did not answer immediately. Megan closed her eyes. That was answer enough. "What is her name?" "Claire," Richard said. "What is her name?" He glanced toward the candle. "Laura Kelly." The name reached backward through decades. Claire remembered a photograph from Richard's college apartment. A smiling young woman in a denim jacket, sitting on the hood of a car with one hand lifted against the sun. Richard had once called Laura his first real love. He had also called her ancient history. "When did this begin?" Claire asked. Richard rubbed his thumb across the edge of his napkin. "We reconnected last year." "Last year when?" "It did not happen in one moment." "Last year when?" Richard's jaw tightened. "After the trade conference in Baltimore." Claire's mind moved through the calendar. Baltimore had been 18 months earlier. Evelyn had fallen in the bathroom the week before the conference. Claire had begged Richard to cancel because the hospital wanted someone home during the first nights after discharge. He had gone anyway. He told Claire the company could not afford for him to miss it. She had slept in a chair beside his mother's bed while Richard found his first love again. Megan reached for her glass. Dad said nothing physical happened for a long time. Claire looked at Richard. He stared at Megan, and Claire saw a flash of irritation before concern replaced it. He had not wanted that detail repeated. Claire understood then that the children did not merely know. Richard had made them custodians of selected pieces of the affair. They had been carrying his explanations, protecting his sequence of events, and waiting for their mother to become the person he had described. "You discussed whether it was physical with our daughter?" Claire asked. Richard lowered his voice. "I was trying to be honest. With everyone except your wife." Megan whispered, "Mom, he thought telling you while Grandma was dying would destroy you." Claire's hand closed around the napkin in her lap. Evelyn had been dead for 4 months. Richard had spent those 4 months sleeping beside Claire, allowing her to arrange funeral flowers, send thank you cards, close medical accounts, and comfort him when he claimed grief made him distant. "How thoughtful of him," Claire said. Megan recoiled. Regret pressed against Claire's throat, but she did not apologize. Not yet. She had apologized too often for the sharp edges of truths other people forced her to hold. Richard leaned toward her. "Laura did not cause this." Claire met his eyes. "Did she know you were married?" "Yes." "Did she know you were still living with me?" "Yes." "Did she know I believed we were married in more than geography?" His gaze shifted. "That is not a fair question." Claire understood his answer. The candle flame bent when someone passed their table. Richard continued in the measured tone he used during meetings. "Laura listened to me. She saw how isolated I had become. She encouraged me to want more from life." Claire looked at the man who had eaten dinners she cooked, worn shirts she washed, accepted reports she prepared, and slept while she cared for his mother. "You were isolated?" "I could not talk to you." "You could have tried." "I did." "When?" Richard shook his head. "This is what I mean. Every conversation becomes an audit." The word was chosen to diminish her. Claire heard it clearly. Her precision had once kept their company alive. Now he used it to make questions sound like defects. Evan leaned closer to the table. "Dad says the company needs everyone focused right now. That development could change everything." Claire turned toward her son. "Is that why you wanted me to take this well?" Color rose along Evan's neck. "I want both of you to be okay." "That was not my question." Richard placed a hand beside Evan's plate. "Leave him out of this. You brought him into it when you discussed my property and my marriage before speaking to me." The waiter approached, saw their faces, and quietly turned away. Claire pushed back her chair. Richard looked up. "Where are you going?" "Home. We came together." "I know." She took her purse from the back of the chair. Megan stood. "Mom, please don't drive when you're upset." Claire froze. The sentence arrived too quickly to belong only to that moment. Richard had told them she was fragile. He had told them stress confused her. He had taught them to question her judgment while calling it concern. Claire put on her cardigan. "I have been making responsible decisions for this family since before either of you could say my name." Megan's mouth trembled. Claire softened her voice, but not her meaning. "I am hurt. That does not make me incapable." Outside, winter air cut through the heat trapped beneath her skin. She stood beneath the restaurant awning and ordered a car through an application on her phone. Her hands shook while she entered the address, but she completed the request without help. Richard came outside before the car arrived. "You embarrassed Megan," he said. Claire stared at him. "You told our children about your affair before you told me. I needed support. So did I. You had my mother's illness to focus on. You had the house. The children called every day." Claire almost asked whether he hurt himself. Instead, she watched him. He looked tired, but not ashamed. Frustrated, but not uncertain. Richard had expected pain. What offended him was Claire's refusal to carry it quietly. You stopped being my wife years ago, he said. You became a mother, a nurse, and a bookkeeper. I needed a partner. Claire felt the words enter places he knew well. She saw herself at 30, working beside him at the kitchen table after both children were asleep. At 40, postponing a professional certification because the company could not afford childcare and tuition together. At 53, learning how to lift Evelyn without hurting her back. Every version of Claire had served the family. Richard now accused her of choosing over him. You accepted every one of those things when they benefited you, she said. Richard looked toward the road. You chose them, Claire. You do not get to turn every choice into a debt. A sedan pulled toward the curb. Claire opened the rear door, then paused. She wanted to ask him to reconsider. The desire humiliated her, but it remained. 32 years did not vanish because truth arrived at dessert. She tightened her fingers around the door handle. Send me your proposal in writing, Claire said. Richard frowned. What proposal? The separation, the company, the farmhouse? Anything you believe I should give up so you can begin your new life. His expression changed, only slightly, but Claire saw it. He had expected tears, bargaining, perhaps a promise to try harder. He had not expected documentation. I am not discussing property tonight, she continued. I will not sign anything without independent advice. You are making this hostile. No, I am making it clear. Claire got into the car and closed the door. Richard remained beneath the restaurant lights as the sedan pulled away. By the time she reached home, he was already there. A folder waited on the kitchen counter. Richard stood beside it with his coat still on. There is one thing you need to sign, he said, before you make this harder than it has to be. Richard stood beside the folder with his coat still buttoned, as if he had no intention of staying long enough to explain himself. Claire closed the kitchen door behind her. Cold air clung to her cardigan. The ride home had given her 20 quiet minutes, but calm had not followed. Her body still carried the restaurant inside it. Candlelight. Untouched cake. Megan lowering her eyes. Evan asking her not to endanger the company. Richard speaking Laura's name without shame. Now cream-colored documents rested on the counter, where Claire usually sorted grocery receipts. There is one thing you need to sign, Richard said, before you make this harder than it has to be. Claire placed her purse on a chair. What is it? A temporary financing authorization. For what? I explained the development at dinner. You discussed it with Evan. You did not explain it to me. Richard removed his gloves one finger at a time. The company has an opportunity to acquire 3 rural properties and convert them into short-term rentals. Laura's firm has experience staging that kind of project. Claire looked at the folder rather than at him. So this is connected to her. It is connected to the company. She owns the staging firm. That does not make the proposal illegitimate. His voice remained even, but Claire noticed what he avoided. He did not say the affair and the business relationship were separate. He did not say Laura had been selected through a competitive process. He did not say why Claire's inheritance appeared in a project he had already discussed with their son. She opened the folder. A photograph of Aunt Ruth's farmhouse appeared beneath a printed cover sheet. Winter branches framed the roof. Pale siding needed paint, and weeds had grown through the stone path, but Claire could still see summer afternoons on the porch. Glasses of iced tea sweating on a wooden table. Her aunt snapping green beans into a bowl. A radio playing through an open kitchen window. Richard had placed a projected rental value beneath the photograph. He had turned memory into collateral before asking permission. Claire read the first page. The paperwork authorized a lender to take a security interest in the farmhouse if the development loan went unpaid. Her name appeared beside several empty signature lines. This is not temporary financing, she said. It is bridge funding. The house secures the debt. For a limited period. If the project fails, I could lose it. Richard moved closer to the counter. The project will not fail. No legitimate projection can promise that. His mouth tightened. This is why I stopped bringing business decisions to you. Because I read them? Because you reduce every opportunity to a list of ways it might go wrong. Claire turned another page. Projected revenue climbed steeply during the first year, but operating costs remained almost flat. There was no allowance for major repairs, no serious reserve for vacancies, no independent appraisal of the farmhouse. Laura's company would receive a generous consulting fee before the first property earned $1. Claire tapped the figure with one fingernail. Laura gets paid whether the project succeeds or not. She has expenses. So do I. Richard pulled out the chair across from her but did not sit. You have not worked closely enough with current operations to understand the opportunity. The insult was carefully constructed. Not that she lacked intelligence, that she was outdated, tired, removed from the world he and Laura now occupied. Claire read the next section. The requested loan exceeded the amount Richard had mentioned at dinner, far exceeded it. What happened to company cash reserves? We invested in growth. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you need tonight. Claire looked up. No, it is the answer you want me to accept tonight. A muscle moved beside his jaw. Richard reached for the folder, but Claire placed her palm over it. I have not finished reading. You said you were exhausted. I am. Then stop turning this into an interrogation. I am reading a document that could cost me my house. Our house. Claire's hand went still. Aunt Ruth left it to me. We have been married for more than 3 decades. That does not change the deed. Richard stared at her. For years, Claire had softened statements like that with an apology. She would have added that she understood his point, or that she did not want property to come between them. Tonight, the words remained where she placed them. His expression shifted first. Not dramatically. Richard rarely allowed anger to make him careless. His shoulders loosened. His voice became quieter. Evan is counting on this project. Claire felt the blow before she understood its shape. Richard stepped closer. The company cannot continue carrying the same overhead without expanding. Evan has spent years learning the business. He believes he is building a future there. Does he know the company is in trouble? I did not say it was in trouble. You said it cannot continue as it is. I said growth matters. You said Evan is counting on this. Richard looked toward the dark window. If the loan does not close, we may have to reduce staff. Claire pictured the reception desk where Marcy kept photographs of her grandchildren. The workshop floor where men who had worked for Richard for 15 years packed lunches into dented metal boxes. Evan, in his first suit, nervous on the morning Richard gave him a company title. You told him the farmhouse would secure the loan, Claire said. I told him we had options. Did you tell him I agreed? Richard did not answer. Claire's fingers curled over the folder's edge. You let our son believe his future depended on something I had never seen. I let him believe his parents would support him. There it was. Refusal transformed into maternal failure before she had even made it. Richard moved around the counter. If you force the company to pull back now, Evan will know why. Claire's throat tightened. A familiar part of her wanted to sign simply to prevent that conversation. She could already imagine Evan's disappointment, Megan's careful concern. Richard telling them their mother had chosen an empty farmhouse over the family business. He had not asked for her property. He had placed their son between Claire and the signature line. She looked down at Aunt Ruth's porch. Her aunt had never married. She had worked at the county library for 40 years, saved carefully, and kept every tax receipt in labeled envelopes. During the final weeks of her life, Ruth had asked Claire to sit beside the bed. Do not let anyone rush you into making that house useful, she had whispered. A safe place is already useful. At the time, Claire thought her aunt was speaking about renovations. Now she understood the warning differently. I want audited statements, Claire said. Richard blinked. What? Current cash flow. Debt schedules. Vendor contracts. Details of Laura's compensation. An independent appraisal and legal review. There is no time for all that. Then there is no time for my signature. You do not trust me. The accusation landed with less force than he expected. Claire closed the folder. You announced an affair at our anniversary dinner. You discussed my inheritance with our children. Now you want me to pledge it to a project that pays your affair partner before it earns income. Richard's face hardened. Laura is not merely my affair partner. Pain moved through Claire with such precision that she almost admired it. Not merely. Laura had already become something Richard believed deserved protection from an accurate description. He lowered his voice. She is a qualified professional. Then her work can withstand independent review. This is not about paperwork. You are punishing me. Claire looked at him for several seconds. You keep describing every boundary I set as punishment. Richard drew back. For the first time that night, he had no immediate answer. Claire took out her phone. What are you doing? Making copies. His hand moved toward the folder. Claire pulled it closer. You said you wanted me to sign. I am entitled to review what you put in front of me. You are not sending confidential business records to strangers. I am sending photographs to myself. Claire. She photographed each page, holding the phone steady even as her fingers trembled. Every click seemed louder than it should have been. Richard remained beside her, breathing through his nose. By the time she reached the signature page, his patience had disappeared. "If this financing collapses because you delay," he said, "I will not lie to Evan about who caused it." Claire emailed the images to a private address Richard did not use. Only after the message showed as sent did she return the papers to their folder. "Tell him the truth," she said. "Tell him you planned a loan against property you do not own, then asked me to sign after promising him the result." Richard's eyes narrowed. "You always know how to make yourself sound reasonable." "No, I finally stopped helping you sound reasonable." Silence filled the kitchen. The refrigerator motor started behind them. Richard stared at Claire as if she had spoken in a language he had not known she understood. Then he picked up the folder. "I am going to Laura's." Claire's stomach clenched, but she did not let the pain alter her face. "Is that where you have been staying?" "I have not moved out yet." "That was not my question." Richard looked toward the stairs. "I will collect some clothes. Use the guest room tonight." He turned back. "This is still my house." "Yes." Claire kept her voice level. "And I am still your wife, the one you humiliated in front of our children. I am not sharing a bed with you tonight." Something cold entered his expression. "You think one dramatic evening changes everything?" "No, I think it revealed what had already changed." Richard climbed the stairs. Claire stayed in the kitchen while drawers opened above her. A closet door struck the wall. Footsteps crossed the bedroom they had shared for decades. She placed both hands on the counter. Her wedding ring touched the stone with a faint click. 32 years pressed through that small circle of gold. She could still remember choosing it from a tray at a jewelry store they could barely afford. Richard had joked that one day he would replace it with something larger. Claire had told him she wanted the original forever. She pulled the ring from her finger. A pale indentation remained. For one breath, she considered leaving it on the counter where he would find it. Instead, she opened the drawer beside the sink and placed it inside an empty ceramic dish. The decision was not final. It was not forgiveness or divorce. It was only a refusal to wear a promise while the man who broke it packed shirts upstairs. Richard came down carrying a garment bag and a small suitcase. His gaze moved to her bare hand. "You enjoy making statements," he said. Claire closed the drawer. "You announced your affair over dessert." He opened the back door. "Get some sleep. You are not thinking clearly." The door shut behind him. Claire waited until his SUV left the driveway. Then she returned to the dining table with her laptop. She opened recent company summaries, household statements, and the estate documents from Aunt Ruth. Fatigue dragged behind her eyes, but numbers still behaved honestly. They did not become offended when questioned. They did not accuse her of hostility for asking where they came from. Cash reserves had declined. Laura's firm appeared repeatedly in vendor totals, always under legitimate-sounding categories: staging, marketing, property consultation. Claire had processed several of those invoices herself. Heat rose through her chest. Had she been blind? She opened one familiar invoice. The format looked professional. Business address, tax identification, description of services. Nothing about it screamed deception. During the previous 6 years, Claire's work had changed gradually. Evelyn's needs increased, and Richard began handling more approvals. The outside accountant prepared tax packets and electronic filings. Claire reconciled totals, checked that invoices matched entries, and kept routine records moving while sleeping in broken stretches between medication alarms. Richard told her Laura was a useful contractor. Claire had checked the arithmetic. She had not known she was checking receipts from his other life. The distinction did not erase her shame, but it gave it a truthful shape. Trust had made her vulnerable. Exhaustion had made the trust easier to exploit. Neither made her stupid. Claire opened another folder on her computer: estate planning. 6 weeks earlier, Richard had scheduled a review after Evelyn's death. He said the loss had reminded him how poorly prepared families could be. Their older life insurance policies, he explained, no longer reflected the value of the company, the house, or future obligations. Claire remembered sitting at the same table while Richard slid a tablet toward her. The application had not been hidden. She had completed a health questionnaire. A nurse came to the house several days later, checked her blood pressure, drew blood, and asked about prescriptions. Claire electronically signed the policy documents after Richard told her the increased coverage was part of a matched plan for both spouses. He had said the children should not inherit debt or confusion. He had said stronger coverage would protect the company if either of them died. Claire searched her email for his policy. Nothing appeared. She searched for her own confirmation. Coverage approved. $900,000. Primary beneficiary. Richard Bennett. Her pulse thickened. Perhaps his policy had arrived separately. Perhaps the agent had used a different email. Perhaps Richard had forgotten to forward it. Claire typed the agent's name into a new message, then stopped. It was late. She needed facts, not frightened questions written at midnight. She saved the email as a draft. Before closing the laptop, she created a new folder, Farmhouse Documents. She placed every photograph inside it, along with Aunt Ruth's deed and estate letter. Then she created another, Insurance. The act felt small, almost embarrassingly ordinary. Still, something shifted. Richard had controlled each conversation by deciding which facts belonged together. The affair remained separate from the business. Laura's invoices remained separate from their relationship. The farmhouse remained separate from Evan's future. Insurance remained separate from all of it. Claire began placing related things side by side. Morning arrived gray and thin. Richard did not return. Megan called before 8. Dad said you threw him out. Claire stood at the kitchen window with coffee cooling between her hands. I asked him to sleep in the guest room. He said you told him to leave. He chose Laura's house. Megan was quiet. Mom, he thinks you are going to block the development just to hurt him. I have not approved the development. Evan says the company needs it. Evan has not seen the full financing documents. How do you know? Because I asked him last night whether he had seen a rough version. He said yes. Megan sighed. Can you please not make us choose sides? Claire closed her eyes. Richard had told the children first, invited them into the business plan, explained Claire's supposed instability, and then accused her of creating sides. I am not asking you to choose, Claire said. I am asking you not to repeat claims you have not verified. Dad is hurting too. I believe he is. The answer seemed to unsettle Megan. Claire continued. Pain does not make every choice equal. Mom? I love you. I am not discussing documents you have not read. Claire ended the call before guilt could change her words. Her hand shook afterward. Setting a boundary did not feel powerful. It felt like disappointing someone she loved and refusing to repair the discomfort for them. She carried her coffee upstairs. Richard had taken enough clothing for several days. One side of the closet stood open. An empty hanger turned slowly on the rail. Claire dressed, gathered the farmhouse documents, and drove to a shipping store with private document services. She printed the photographs, made copies, and placed them in a sealed envelope addressed to herself at Aunt Ruth's farmhouse. A second copy went into a safe deposit box she had maintained since settling the estate. No confrontation. No dramatic accusation. Only preservation. When she returned home, Richard's SUV sat in the driveway. He stood beside Claire's car with the hood raised. Her steps slowed. What are you doing? Richard looked over his shoulder. Checking the fluid levels. Why? You said you need to drive to the farmhouse next week. Claire approached, but stopped several feet away. I did not tell you that. You mentioned sorting Aunt Ruth's papers. That does not answer my question. Richard lowered the hood. I have always taken care of the cars. The sentence sounded ordinary. It had been ordinary for 32 years. Claire looked at his hand resting on the metal. A faint unease passed through her, too vague to name, and too quickly buried beneath habit. Do not make any changes without telling me, she said. Richard gave a short laugh. Now I need permission to maintain my wife's car? You need permission to do anything to a car I drive. His face became unreadable. Then he stepped away. Fine. Claire waited until he entered the house before opening the driver's door. Nothing appeared disturbed. The floor mats were clean. Her reusable grocery bags remained folded in the back seat. She almost felt foolish. Almost. She took a photograph of the dashboard and mileage before closing the door. 2 mornings later, Claire drove toward the attorney's office that had handled Aunt Ruth's estate. A grocery bag rested on the passenger seat. 2 oranges rolled free when the road began to slope. By nightfall, she was in a hospital bed, opening the same insurance file with bruised fingers while Richard spoke to someone in the hallway. $900,000. The farmhouse documents. His promise to Evan. Her refusal. Richard's hand on the hood of her car. Claire stared at the beneficiary line until the letters sharpened. For the first time, she allowed the thoughts to remain together. She did not yet know what they proved, but she knew what they demanded. She would stop letting Richard decide which questions were reasonable. Claire did not tell Richard what she had begun to suspect. She watched him through the narrow opening in the hospital doorway while he spoke to the insurance company. His back remained straight. His voice carried the patient weariness of a man handling an inconvenience on behalf of an emotional wife. "Yes," Richard said into the phone. "She is conscious. No, the injuries are not serious." Claire's fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. He had not asked the doctor whether her injuries were serious. He had heard the physician say there were no fractures and turned that into certainty. Richard continued, "The vehicle is being held for some kind of inspection. I tried to avoid that, but Claire is shaken." He glanced toward the room. Claire let her face remain still. "Yes," Richard said. "I understand. Call me if you need anything else." He ended the call and returned to her bedside. "Insurance may send someone to look at the car," he said. "The police are already arranging an independent inspection." Richard slipped his phone into his coat pocket. "Those things can take time." "Then they take time." His gaze settled on her. "You cannot leave the car sitting in storage indefinitely." "I nearly drove into a school bus." "You keep saying that as though I am not aware." Claire looked at his hands. They were steady now. "I am saying it because you keep treating the car as the problem and not what happened to me." Richard pulled the chair closer but did not sit. "What do you want me to do, Claire? Cry in the hallway? Demand that everyone stop working because you had an accident?" The word entered the room before she could challenge it. Accident. He had already chosen the conclusion. Claire picked up her phone. "I want to speak to the officer who took my statement." Richard's mouth thinned. "You gave your statement." "I want his name and the report number." "Why?" "So I can follow up. Let the police do their job." "That is what I intend to do." For several seconds, Richard said nothing. Then his expression softened into something almost tender. "You have been through a shock," he said. "Right now, every question feels urgent. By tomorrow, you may see this differently." Claire remembered the anniversary dinner. He had told her pain distorted her judgment. He had told the children exhaustion made her unreliable. Now fear itself was being used to disqualify her. "Perhaps," Claire said, "I will still ask for the information." Richard looked toward the hallway. "I will find the officer." He left without arguing further. Claire knew better than to mistake surrender for agreement. An hour later, a young patrol officer entered with a notepad tucked beneath one arm. Officer Daniels introduced himself again and explained that the initial report had been filed. Claire asked for the case information. Richard remained near the window. Officer Daniels gave Claire a card with a handwritten reference number. "We have requested that the vehicle stay secured until a qualified examiner can look at it," the officer said. "Has anyone inspected it yet?" Claire asked. "Only enough to determine that it should not be released for repair." Richard folded his arms. "What does that mean?" he asked. Officer Daniels looked at Claire before answering. "It means we are not making assumptions." "That sounds like a diplomatic way of saying nothing was found," Richard said. "No, sir," Officer Daniels replied. "It means the examination is not complete." Claire kept her eyes on the card. "Will someone contact me?" "Yes, ma'am. A detective may also call after reviewing the report." Richard gave a quiet sigh. "I hope everyone remembers this is an older car." Officer Daniels turned toward him. "Were you responsible for its maintenance?" Richard paused only briefly. "Most of the time." "Who serviced it last?" "I would have to check." Claire looked up. 2 weeks earlier, Richard had told her he had taken care of everything. Now he needed to check. Officer Daniels wrote something down. Richard noticed Claire watching him. "The company has several vehicles," Richard said. "I do not memorize every service date." "This was my car," Claire said. Richard's eyes sharpened. "Yes, Claire, I know whose car it was." Officer Daniels closed his notepad. "We will contact you when we have more information." After he left, Richard walked to the foot of the bed. "You are making ordinary answers sound suspicious." Claire placed the card inside her purse. "I did not say anything." "You did not have to." "Then perhaps you heard how your answer sounded." Richard stared at her. The door opened before he could respond. Megan entered carrying coffee, followed by Evan with a paper bag of sandwiches. Claire had never been so relieved to see her children and so uncertain how to speak to them. Megan set the coffee on the bedside table. "Dad says you may come home this afternoon." "The doctor has not said that yet," Claire replied. Richard looked annoyed. "I said probably." Evan handed Richard a sandwich. "Do they know what happened to the car?" "Not yet," Claire said. Richard opened the paper bag. They have not found anything connecting the failure to anyone. Claire turned toward him. No one asked whether they had. Megan's hand stopped above the coffee lid. Richard looked at Claire as though she had introduced ugliness into an otherwise peaceful room. You know what everyone is thinking. I know what I am questioning. Evan lowered himself into the chair. Are you accusing Dad? Claire saw fear beneath his defensiveness. Not only fear for Richard, fear for his job, the company, and the future he believed had already been promised. I am not accusing anyone, Claire said. I am waiting for an independent report. Richard gave a humorless laugh. That sounds reasonable until you remember she refused to let the car go to our regular garage. Our regular garage works with your company, Claire said. They are reputable. That may be true. An independent inspection is still appropriate. Megan looked from one parent to the other. Mom, what exactly do you think happened? Claire's ribs hurt when she drew a deeper breath. I know the brakes did not respond. I know your father tried to have the car moved before it was inspected. I know I increased my life insurance 6 weeks ago. I know I refused to sign documents involving the farmhouse 2 days before the crash. Silence gathered. Evan stared at her. Richard set the sandwich down. That is enough. Claire turned toward him. You do not decide when I have said enough. Megan's face paled. Life insurance? Richard spoke quickly. It was an estate planning update. Both of us were supposed to review our coverage. Where is your new policy? Claire asked. Richard's gaze did not move. The paperwork is being processed. My policy is already active. Yours was simpler. Why? Because you have fewer business complications. Claire heard the answer but not the explanation. Evan rubbed both hands over his face. This is getting out of control. No, Richard said. Your mother is frightened and connecting things that do not belong together. Claire looked at Megan. Their daughter's expression carried sympathy, but Richard's language was already settling into place. Frightened. Connecting unrelated things. Not herself. Claire knew that if she argued too hard, she would become the woman Richard had described. If she said nothing, his version would harden around her. She chose a narrower path. I do not need either of you to agree with me today, Claire said to the children. I need you not to repeat conclusions before the inspection is complete. Megan nodded slowly. Evan looked toward Richard. Richard picked up his sandwich again. Of course, he said. We should all wait for facts. His agreement sounded generous because he believed the facts would never point back to him. Claire came home late that afternoon. Megan insisted on driving her. Richard followed in his SUV, though Claire had not asked him to. Winter light had faded by the time they entered the house. Every room looked unchanged. Richard's shoes remained beneath the hall table. His coffee mug sat beside the sink. A folded blanket lay across the arm of the couch where Claire had left it. Familiarity made the previous 2 days feel unreal. Megan helped Claire settle into the downstairs guest room. You should not climb the stairs tonight, Megan said. I can manage. I know you can. Megan tucked an extra pillow behind Claire's back. The tenderness almost undid her. Claire studied her daughter's face. When did your father first tell you I was not doing well? Megan's hands went still. He did not say it like that. How did he say it? Megan sat on the edge of the chair. He said you were overwhelmed after Grandma got worse. He said you were forgetting things and becoming anxious about money. What things did I forget? I do not know. Did he give you examples? Megan looked toward the doorway. He said you left the stove on. The kettle. What? I left a kettle boiling once while the hospice nurse called. Your father was in Baltimore. Megan pressed her lips together. He said there were other things. Did he name them? No. Claire let the answer remain between them. Megan looked down at her wedding ring. He was worried about you. Was he? Mom, I'm asking. Megan stood. I do not want to do this while you are injured. Claire heard Richard in the sentence. Louder. When you are calmer, when the moment has passed. Megan, Claire said. Did he ask you to keep the affair from me because he believed I was unstable? Megan's face changed. Not much. Enough. He said telling you while Grandma was dying would be cruel. And after she died? He said you needed time. How much time? Megan folded her arms around herself. I do not know. Claire nodded. The answer hurt, but it gave shape to something important. Richard had not invented her supposed instability after the crash. He had been building it for months. Perhaps longer. Megan moved toward the door. I love you. I love you too. Claire waited until her daughter reached the hallway. Megan? She turned. Concern should make someone easier to hear, Claire said. Not easier to dismiss. Megan's eyes filled, but she left without answering. Richard stayed downstairs after everyone else had gone. Claire heard him opening cupboards in the kitchen. Water ran. A glass touched the counter. At 9, he appeared in the guest room doorway. "I will sleep upstairs," he said. Claire looked up from her phone. "I assumed you would stay with Laura." Richard's expression cooled. "I thought you might need help." "I have my phone. Megan lives 15 minutes away." "You would rather call our daughter in the middle of the night than ask your husband? You have told me you are leaving. That does not mean I want you hurt." Claire held his gaze. The words should have reassured her. Instead, they made the room colder. Richard rested one hand on the door frame. "I spoke to Evan," he said. "He is worried about what your suspicions could do to the company." "My suspicions are not public." "They will become public if police start asking employees questions. That would be their decision. You can tell them you believe the failure was mechanical. I do not know what caused it. You told the officer the brakes failed." "They did. That is not the same as sabotage." "I have never said it was." Richard gave her a long look. "You are implying it." Claire set her phone on the blanket. "Why does the possibility frighten you so much?" His face emptied. Then he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the expression he used when a client became unreasonable, and he wanted to appear patient before ending the conversation. "I am frightened for you," Richard said. "You are building a nightmare around yourself." Claire watched him step away. Before leaving, he added, "When the report comes back, I hope you are prepared to apologize to the people you have hurt." The door closed. Claire remained awake long after the house went silent. She did not know whether Richard was guilty. That uncertainty mattered. She would not replace his manipulation with her own certainty. She opened the notes application on her phone and wrote the date. Beneath it, she recorded his exact words. "When the report comes back, I hope you are prepared to apologize." The next morning, Detective Maria Alvarez called. Her voice was calm and direct. "Mrs. Bennett, I am reviewing the vehicle incident. Is this a good time to speak?" Claire sat straighter against the pillows. "Yes. I need to confirm a few details. Who had regular access to your car?" "My husband and I." "Anyone else?" "Possibly company employees when it was parked at Richard's office. Service workers. I do not know who had keys." "Did your husband drive it recently?" Claire remembered Richard standing beside the open hood. "He handled maintenance. 2 days before the crash, I found him checking something under the hood in our driveway." A pause followed. "Did he tell you what he was doing?" "He said he was checking fluid levels." "Did you ask him to?" "No." Detective Alvarez continued taking notes. Claire described the affair, the farmhouse papers, the insurance policy, and the argument. She did not embellish. Each time emotion threatened to hurry her, she slowed down. When Claire finished, the detective said, "I want to be clear about where this stands. The initial observations raised enough concern to preserve the vehicle. That does not identify a person responsible." "I understand. We will review service records, access, available cameras, and other information. That process may take time." "Will Richard know what I told you?" "He may learn the general subjects during the investigation. I cannot promise confidentiality between witnesses." Claire looked toward the ceiling. "Has he been cleared?" "No." The answer came without hesitation. "Has anyone?" "No." Claire closed her eyes. "Richard told our children there was no evidence against him. At this stage, we have not reached a conclusion about anyone," Detective Alvarez said. "No arrest does not mean a person has been cleared. It means we do not yet have enough evidence to take that action." After the call, Claire repeated those words aloud. No arrest does not mean cleared. By lunchtime, Richard had told Megan and Evans something different. Megan called first. "Dad says the police believe it was a maintenance issue." Claire stood at the kitchen counter, one hand resting against her bruised ribs. "That is not what Detective Alvarez told me." Megan hesitated. "You spoke to a detective?" "Yes." "What did she say?" "That the vehicle is being preserved because the failure may not be ordinary. They have not identified who was responsible. Dad said they found nothing. They have not finished looking." Megan became quiet. Claire heard her daughter breathing. "Mom, are you sure you understood?" Pain flashed hotter than the bruising beneath Claire's skin. She gripped the counter until it passed. "Yes," Claire said. "I am sure. I did not mean it like that. I know exactly how you meant it. That is why it hurts." Megan whispered her name. Claire softened her tone without retreating. "Call the detective if you need confirmation. Do not ask me to doubt my own conversation because your father gave you a more comfortable version." Claire ended the call with shaking fingers. Richard entered through the back door 10 minutes later. He carried a grocery bag and wore an expression of practiced concern. Megan is upset. You told her the police believe it was a maintenance problem. They have no proof of anything else. That is not the same statement. It is the practical meaning. No, it is the meaning that protects you. Richard placed the groceries on the counter. You are poisoning the children against me, Claire almost answered immediately. Instead, she breathed through the first surge of anger. She remembered Detective Alvarez's restraint. Facts first, conclusions later. I am going to ask you once, Claire said. Did the police tell you that they believe the failure was caused by poor maintenance? Richard looked at her. No. Did they tell you that you had been cleared? No. Then do not tell our children either thing. His face hardened. You do not give me instructions. I just did. Richard stared at Claire for a long moment, then walked out of the kitchen. The door to his office closed with a quiet click. Claire did not follow. She carried her laptop and the blue notebook from the junk drawer to the dining table. On the first page, she wrote 3 headings in full sentences. The crash, the insurance, and every police contact belonged together. The affair, Laura, and money spent during the marriage belonged together. The company, the farmhouse, and Claire's legal ownership belonged together. She created matching folders on her computer. Into the first, she placed the policy confirmation, Owen's message, Officer Daniels's card, and her notes from Detective Alvarez. Into the second, she saved Laura's name, the date Richard claimed they reconnected, and every vendor reference Claire could lawfully access. Into the third, she placed the farmhouse photographs, deed, financing proposal, and a note to locate the company's original records. The work took most of the afternoon. Nothing dramatic happened. No one confessed. No patrol car returned. Richard remained behind his office door. Still, the balance inside the house changed. Until that day, he had controlled the story by scattering its pieces. Claire's first act of power was not solving the mystery. It was refusing to leave the pieces where he had placed them. By the following morning, Claire's dining table no longer looked like part of a home. It looked like a place where a life could be reconstructed. Insurance documents rested beside the farmhouse proposal. Officer Daniels's card sat on top of her handwritten notes from Detective Alvarez. A printed copy of Richard's message to Megan had been placed beneath the page where Claire recorded his exact claim that police believed the crash resulted from poor maintenance. Her ribs ached whenever she leaned too far across the table, but the pain had become useful. It slowed her down. It forced her to examine each page instead of reacting to it. Richard came out of his office shortly after 8. He had changed into a navy suit and the pale blue tie he wore when meeting lenders. His eyes moved across the table, pausing on each folder. "What are you doing?" Richard asked. Claire closed the notebook in front of her. "Organizing my records. You are turning our dining room into an investigation. The police are conducting the investigation." Richard picked up his keys from the sideboard. "Then why are you doing this?" "Because your explanation changes depending on who is listening." His fingers stopped around the key ring. Claire waited for the familiar response, an accusation that she was emotional, a reminder that she had misunderstood, a soft warning about what her suspicions could do to the children. Richard only looked at the folders. "Do not remove company documents from the house," he said. "I have not." "Do not contact employees." "I have not done that either." "Then we understand each other." Richard walked toward the front hall. Claire opened her laptop. "I need access to the bookkeeping system." His back remained toward her. "You do not need access right now. I am still responsible for the monthly reconciliation." I reassigned it. Claire's fingers rested on the keyboard. "To whom?" "The outside accountant will handle it until you recover." "When did you make that decision?" "After the accident." "You disabled my password before asking whether I was able to work?" Richard turned. "You nearly drove through an intersection. I am not letting you make financial entries while taking pain medication. I have taken nothing stronger than over-the-counter medicine since yesterday." "That is not the point." "Then what is?" His mouth tightened. "The point is that I am responsible for protecting the company from instability." Claire looked at him. For years, Richard had described her caution as obstruction. Now he was using caution as a reason to remove her. "I want written confirmation that my access has been suspended," Claire said. "You are my wife, not opposing counsel. Then answering should be simple." Richard's gaze moved from her face to the computer. "You do not have an operational role anymore." Claire heard the words clearly, yet her mind resisted them. I prepare the internal reconciliation every month. You used to. I prepared the last one. You checked figures prepared by other people. That is not the same as running the books. Heat spread beneath Claire's skin. She remembered mornings at the kitchen table before sunrise. Vendor calls taken while packing school lunches. Payroll shortages covered from money her father left her. Weekends spent tracing missing invoices while Richard met clients on golf courses. You told the children I was the company bookkeeper, Claire said. I said you helped with bookkeeping. Helped. Richard released a breath. This is why I did not want to discuss business while you were recovering. No. You did not want to discuss it because you planned to remove me before I could ask what happened to the money. His face changed. The shift lasted less than a second, but Claire saw it. A stillness, not outrage at being falsely accused. Calculation. Richard opened the front door. If you attempt to enter company systems without authorization, I will treat it as a security issue. Claire stared at him. Are you threatening to report your wife for accessing records she has managed for decades? I am informing you that the company has procedures. Procedures you changed after I questioned you. Richard stepped outside. Rest, Claire. The door closed. She remained at the table, listening to his car pull away. Only after the sound faded did she try her password again. Access denied. Claire entered it a second time, checking each letter. The same message appeared. She used the password reset function. The system informed her that her account had been deactivated by an administrator. Claire took a screenshot. Then she called the outside accountant. The firm's receptionist transferred her to Martin Hale, who had worked with Bennett Renovation for nearly 12 years. Martin answered with the distracted warmth of someone already surrounded by other people's deadlines. Claire, I heard about the accident. Are you all right? Bruised, but home. I am glad it was not worse. Thank you. Martin, has Richard told you that I no longer have an operational role in the company? Silence followed. Not long enough to be dramatic. Long enough to matter. He said you were stepping back, Martin replied. When? A few weeks ago. Claire's hand tightened around the phone. What exactly did he say? That you had decided the workload was too much after Evelyn's illness, and that the two of you were discussing a permanent change. I never decided that. Martin cleared his throat. I may have misunderstood. Did Richard instruct your office to disable my access? He requested that all internal permissions be reviewed after the accident. That happened yesterday. Another pause. Claire, this may be something you need to discuss with Richard. I already did. She opened the folder labeled Company and wrote the date beside Martin's name. I need copies of the current operating agreement, the original ownership documents, and any records showing a transfer or surrender of my interest. Martin's voice became more careful. Richard told me the ownership structure had been reorganized. He told me the same thing. Claire remembered the conversation from several years earlier. Evelyn had just returned home after a hospital stay. The dining table had been covered with prescription bottles and home health instructions. Richard arrived after dark carrying a packet of business papers. He said the company was changing its structure to make future borrowing easier. Claire asked whether her ownership would change. Richard told her the interest would become non-voting and mostly ceremonial. He said it would reduce complications if one of them died and protect the children from tax problems. An electronic filing had already been prepared. Claire signed acknowledgement pages and tax documents while listening for Evelyn's bell from the guest room. Afterward, Richard behaved as though her share existed only on paper. Claire had believed him, not because she forgot owning part of the company, because he convinced her ownership no longer meant power. Martin, Claire said, did I sign a transfer? I need to review the file. Please do. I may need Richard's authorization before releasing company records. I am requesting documents relating to my own ownership. Yes, I understand. Do you have a valid transfer bearing my signature? Martin did not answer immediately. I cannot confirm that without reviewing everything. Then review it. Claire kept her voice calm. Please send me written confirmation that I requested the documents today. Martin agreed. After the call ended, Claire sat motionless. Sunlight had moved across the table, touching the corner of Aunt Ruth's deed. Claire had known about the original 35% interest. The knowledge had become something distant, like a room in a house no one used anymore. Richard did not need to make her forget the room existed. He only needed to convince her the door had been sealed. An email arrived 20 minutes later. Martin confirmed her request and stated that the ownership file was under review. Claire saved it in 3 places. Then she drove to the company's original storage office. The building stood behind the newer showroom, separated by a narrow service lane. Bennett Renovation had operated from that cramped brick unit during its first 7 years. Richard later turned it into storage for archived files, product samples, and outdated furniture. Claire still had a key. She had never been asked to surrender it. The office smelled of cardboard, dust, and old carpet glue. A metal desk leaned against one wall beneath stacks of discontinued tile catalogs. Gray filing cabinets occupied the back room. Claire switched on the light. The fluorescent tubes flickered before settling into a weak hum. Her shoulder hurt as she removed the first archive box, so she lowered it to the floor rather than carrying it to the desk. Tax year labels ran along one side. Claire worked slowly. Old payroll records, insurance certificates, vehicle registrations, vendor contracts. The company's early years had not been digitized. Richard once mocked her insistence on keeping paper copies, but Claire had never trusted a record that could disappear when someone changed a password. Near the bottom of a cabinet, she found a blue ledger with a cracked spine. Her breath caught. She carried it to the desk and sat. The cover felt soft at the corners from years of use. Claire opened to the first page. Her own handwriting filled the columns. Rent, lumber, payroll, fuel, insurance. Every dollar entered with a date and source. The company had nearly failed during its 3rd winter. 2 major clients delayed payment. Richard refused to lay off workers before Christmas. Claire used part of the inheritance her father left her to keep wages current and cover supplier accounts. $150,000. Richard called it an investment in their future. Claire turned the pages. A folded document had been clipped behind the winter payroll entries. The paper resisted when she opened it. A promissory note. Richard's signature appeared at the bottom. The company agreed to repay Claire the full amount, with modest interest, once cash flow stabilized. Claire stared at the signature. Richard had later told her the money became part of their shared marital contribution. He said keeping track of repayment would be petty because they both benefited from the company's survival. She had let the matter fade. The note had not. A line of handwriting appeared beside the payroll total. It was not Claire's. Her father had written it during one of his final visits, when she showed him how carefully she was tracking the loan. A promise kept quietly is still a promise owed. Claire touched the sentence with one fingertip. The office blurred. She remembered her father sitting at the kitchen table in a brown cardigan, glasses low on his nose. He had warned her not to confuse love with the absence of records. Good people write things down too, he said. Not because they expect betrayal, because memory bends toward whoever speaks loudest. At the time, Claire thought he was being overly cautious. Now Richard was speaking loudest. Her father had left her something stronger than a warning. He had left her proof. A noise sounded in the outer room. Claire closed the ledger. Footsteps crossed the carpet. Richard appeared in the doorway. He wore no coat, though cold air followed him inside. "What are you doing here?" Richard asked. Claire kept one hand on the ledger. "Reviewing records. You are supposed to be resting." "How did you know I was here?" "Marcy saw your car." Claire had passed the showroom without noticing anyone at the reception desk. Richard entered the room. "You do not have permission to remove company documents." "I have not removed anything." His eyes dropped to the open cabinet. "What are you looking for?" "My ownership records. We have discussed this. You told me the company was restructured." "It was." "Did I transfer my interest?" Richard's jaw tightened. "You signed the reorganization papers." "That was not my question." "You received the tax documents every year." "Did I sign a valid transfer?" Richard moved closer. Claire felt the instinct to stand, then rejected it. Rising too quickly would hurt her ribs. Remaining seated did not make her weaker. "I am not conducting a legal examination in a storage room," he said. "Then answer as my husband. You have spent 2 days treating me like a criminal." "I have spent 2 days asking questions." "And every answer becomes another accusation?" Claire opened the promissory note on the desk. "Was this loan repaid?" Richard looked down. Something in his face closed. "That money went into a marital business. The company signed a note. You benefited from every dollar. So did the employees whose payroll it covered. That does not erase the debt." Richard gave a short laugh. "Now you want repayment from your own husband?" "I want an accurate record." "You want leverage." Claire looked at the man in front of her. His anger no longer frightened her in the same way. Not because it had become harmless, but because she could see what triggered it. Facts he had placed beyond her reach. Documents he believed she had forgotten. Questions that required answers rather than explanations. "I am taking copies," Claire said. "No?" Richard reached toward the ledger. Claire placed both hands over it. "Do not touch me or the book." His hand stopped. They remained that way for several seconds. Richard's arm lowered. "You are not well," he said. "I am well enough to recognize my own signature and yours." "Claire, listen to yourself." "I am." She rose carefully, keeping the ledger against her body. Richard stood between her and the outer office. The position was not openly threatening. There was enough room to pass. Still, he had chosen the doorway. Claire looked directly at him. "Move." His face hardened. "This performance will not help you." "Move, Richard." He stepped aside. Claire walked past him, each breath pulling at the bruise beneath her ribs. At the copy machine, she scanned the promissory note, relevant ledger pages, and early ownership documents she found in the same cabinet. She emailed the files to her secure account before placing every original back where she found it. Richard watched from the doorway. "You think paper will explain 32 years of marriage?" he asked. "No." Claire closed the cabinet. "It will explain what happened to the money." She left with digital copies, photographs of the file locations, and a written inventory of what remained in storage. Richard did not follow her outside. That afternoon, Martin Hale called. Claire answered from her car before leaving the parking lot. "I reviewed the corporate file," Martin said. "The original agreement lists you as holding a 35% interest." "I know. There are later amendments affecting voting and management authority." "Did I transfer the ownership?" "No completed transfer appears in the file." Claire closed her eyes. Traffic moved along the road beyond the windshield. "Are you certain?" "I found draft documents. I found correspondence discussing a possible transfer. I found acknowledgments related to tax treatment. I did not find an executed sale, assignment, or surrender of your interest." Richard had not taken her ownership. He had done something more useful to him. He had persuaded Claire that exercising it would be improper. "Please send me certified copies," she said. Martin hesitated. "Richard may object. Does he have the authority to prevent an owner from receiving her own ownership records?" "I will need to confirm the release procedure." "Confirm it in writing," Martin exhaled. "All right. And preserve the complete file." "I will." Claire ended the call. Her hands rested in her lap. She expected triumph. What came instead was grief. Richard knew she owned part of the company. Every time he called it his business, every time he told Evan he alone would decide its future, every time he reduced Claire's work to helping, he knew. He had not forgotten her contribution. He had edited it out. By evening, Claire was back at the dining table. She opened the financial statements from accounts she could lawfully review. Joint checking, joint savings, company summaries previously sent to her email, vendor invoices she had processed before her access disappeared. Laura's firm appeared again and again. Nothing looked absurd at first. Each payment had a business description: staging consultation, property assessment, fourniture procurement, marketing retainer, travel reimbursement. Claire created a spreadsheet. She entered dates, amounts, descriptions, and project names. Then she compared those entries with Richard's calendar, photographs posted by Laura's business, and addresses listed on the invoices. Patterns emerged slowly. A furniture payment assigned to a model home appeared 3 weeks after that property had already sold. A travel reimbursement covered a weekend, when no company project existed in the destination city. A condominium deposit had been divided across several invoices labeled as consulting advances. Claire found a photograph on Laura's public business page. A cream-colored sofa stood behind her in a newly decorated living room. Claire enlarged the image. The sofa matched one purchased through a company furniture invoice. The delivery address did not belong to a Bennett renovation property. It belonged to Laura's condominium. Claire sat back. The room had grown dark around her. She turned on the table lamp and continued. By midnight, the questionable payments exceeded $84,000. Claire did not label every dollar as stolen. Some work may have been legitimate. Laura owned a real staging company. She may have performed genuine services. That was what made the concealment effective. Richard had not hidden bundles of cash. He had placed personal benefits inside transactions that looked plausible to the tired woman checking totals after midnight. Claire printed the spreadsheet. At the bottom, she wrote one sentence. Requires independent review. Not proof. Not accusation. A question supported by records. Her phone rang the following morning. Owen's name appeared on the screen. Claire considered letting it go to voicemail. Their last conversation had concerned the car. She did not know whether hearing another warning would clarify anything or simply deepen her fear. She answered, "Hello. It is Owen. I know." A pause followed. "I wanted to ask permission before sending you something," Owen said. Claire looked toward the folders. "What is it?" "Old correspondence from when Richard forced me out of the company." Claire's spine straightened. "Why now?" "Because an investigator asked about my history with both of you. I reviewed the records before giving my statement." "What do they show?" "They show what Richard told me about you." Claire said nothing. Owen continued. "He said you believed I had taken company money. He said you wanted me removed but did not want to confront me." Claire's hand tightened around the phone. "Richard told me you admitted taking it." "I never did." "I know that now. I also have letters I sent asking for a meeting." "Richard answered that you refused." Claire remembered none of them. "Did you send them to the house?" "To the company office." "Richard handled the mail there." Claire looked at the blue ledger beside her laptop. "Send copies," she said. "Do not send originals." "I would not." "And send them directly to my secure email. I will give you the address." "All right." Owen did not ask whether she trusted him. He did not tell her what conclusion to reach. Before ending the call, Claire asked one more question. "Why did you stop trying?" Owen's silence held no accusation. "Richard told me you had seen the evidence and chosen him," Owen said. "After a while, continuing to contact you felt like refusing to respect your decision." Claire closed her eyes. Richard had told Owen that Claire chose betrayal. He had told Claire that Owen confessed. Neither had spoken to the other. The same structure appeared everywhere now. Richard told Megan that Claire was unstable. He told Claire that Megan feared her reactions. He told Evan that Claire threatened his future. He told Claire that Evan expected the farmhouse. He told Laura that the marriage had ended. He told Claire that Laura entered only after the marriage was already dead. Richard did not merely lie. He built walls from different truths, then told each person that someone else had closed the door. Owen's email arrived. Claire opened the attachments. One letter was dated 18 years earlier. Owen had written that no money was missing. He had requested an independent review and offered full access to his records. Richard's response stated that Claire had lost confidence in Owen and would not reconsider. Her name appeared several times. Her voice appeared nowhere. Claire printed the correspondence and placed it beside the promissory note, the ownership agreement, and Laura's invoices. The documents did not solve the crash. They did something else. They revealed Richard's method. Claire called Martin again. "I need the certified ownership documents sent to my attorney's office as soon as I retain counsel," she said. "You have not given me an attorney's name." "I will." She then contacted the bank and requested certified statements for every joint account she was legally entitled to review. Afterward, Claire photographed each page of the blue ledger and returned the original to a secure location outside the house. By late afternoon, copies existed in more than one place. Richard could change a password. He could call her confused. He could tell their children she had never contributed. He could not make the documents forget. Claire sat at the dining table as winter light faded against the windows. For 32 years, she had believed peace depended on her willingness to let certain things go. A debt. A cruelle sentence. A missing explanation. A question Richard did not want to answer. The life he erased had not vanished. It had been waiting in ledgers, signatures, bank records, and memories Claire finally trusted enough to examine. Richard had spent years teaching everyone that Claire merely helped him. Now she knew the truth. She had not been helping Richard run his company. She had been protecting a company that was partly hers.